It's time for the Las Vegas Sports Line, brought to you by the Sunset Station with sports director Chuck Esposito. Presented by WagerTalk.com.
And here we go. It is the Monday edition of the Las Vegas Sports Line, our final Monday afternoon quarterback edition, because the football season came to a close yesterday. That means Chuck Esposito from Sunset Station, Stations Casinos, is with us. Marco DAngelo is here. I'm Dave Cokin. Harry Platinum is producing. Guys, before we get to the Super Bowl, I posed this question about an hour ago on Twitter, and I want to ask each of you, because it's to me it's an interesting, thought-provoking question. We have our MVP from the Super Bowl, Edelman, who was suspended earlier this season for 4 games for a PED violation. If this was baseball, he wouldn't have even been eligible to play in the postseason. If you draw an in-season suspension in baseball, you can't play in the postseason. Ask the Mariners, had they made the playoffs this year, Robinson Cano would not have been eligible. So the question is, which sport do you think has it right in terms of the penalty for a drug violation? What do you think, Chuck?
I guess it's hard to say. I don't remember if it was Cano's first, or was it his first offense as well? Yeah. And was Edelman's more of a test in the off season too? Was it in season?
Well, he was suspended for 4 games, so the suspension was in season as Cano's was.
But the suspension occurred in the off season, though, right? For the test initially for Edelman.
I don't know when it occurred.
I believe it was off season because he was out at the beginning of the season, right. So he tested somewhere between the end of last season and before this season started.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that to me would be the gray area. If it actually occurred during the season, I could see it being where you're not eligible for the postseason. But I would think off season, if you were suspended for a time, that you should be eligible. That's just my opinion.
For me, I can't compare anything with baseball when they're talking about PEDs, because we would not have had the McGuire-Socha home run derby the year that went on, which really baseball needed at the time.
They
because
didn't even have testing at the time.
Right,
So.
But they knew what was going on.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
yeah. And,
absolutely.
It closed the ride because baseball at the time needed something to rejuvenate it after the strikes and stuff. So I can't give baseball the higher ground there for that one.
The interesting thing is that in football, there is no penalty, basically, aside from the 4 games that you get. In baseball, it's a career deal, because even though he actually never tested positive, but Barry Bonds can't get into the Hall of Fame. Roger Clemens cannot get into the Hall of Fame. In football, they were talking at the end of the game, well, this clinches the Hall of Fame for Edelman. My opinion, I think I side more with the football. Once the suspension's done, you've served your penalty. That should be it. Yeah, and that I can't agree.
My feeling as well. Yeah.
In football, don't forget, if the first one's 4 games, the second time you're gone for a year.
Right.
So they do have a next step if it happens, and that's something with Le'Veon Bell when he's moving forward. He's got that hanging on him that anybody that that's going to be signing him in the offseason, remember, he's already had a 4-game suspension. If it happens again, you've lost him for the year.
All right. Interesting question anyway.
Yeah.
And good opinions. And hopefully if those who follow me on Twitter will answer with some good opinions as well. It's an interesting discussion. Let's talk game, and let's start with the betting aspect of the Super Bowl, Chuck. Well, basically, how'd the house do?
Better than expected. I think, Dave, the way it all shook out, I think with the Patriots covering the number wasn't ideal as far as the point spread goes. But I think everything else, kind of was fantastic. I think when you think about that last field goal that the Patriots took, it killed teasers on the Rams. Teasers were already killed on the over, and I think keeping the game under was huge industry-wide. And overall, most of the props were an extremely positive outcome for sportsbooks. I think with the total that was posted so high, the highest ever, and then went up to 59, and the way that these two teams can score and all the hype about offense, we saw what the Chiefs-Rams did during the regular season and the Pats-Rams in the championship, that the props were really geared to and bet heavily by the guests in favor of offense. And when that didn't occur, it bode well for sportsbooks.
Yeah, saying fantastic on the props had to be a little bit of an understatement because that was everything had to be.
That was a good
word. Yeah, fantastic. That would be the equivalent of me, saying we went 23-2 over the last 25 games. I say, yeah, that was a fantastic run. Yeah,
I would hope you would say that.
Yeah. I'm sure. I was worried you weren't going to make the show, Chuck. I didn't think you guys would be able to be done counting the money from the props yesterday, to be honest with you. With everything going under, I just before we went on air, I made the joke. I told the guys here in the studio, if I would have fell asleep yesterday and slept through the Super Bowl and woke up, and you would have said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you half of the outcome and let you bet from there. The Rams held the Patriots to 13 points.
One touchdown.
What do you want to do? What do you want to do? I would be, hitting up one of you guys for a place to stay because I would have lost the house on that one.
Well, I mean, you think about the props, though, but, I mean, Edelman was not a good outcome, for MVP. 3 straight scores was not a good outcome. No score in the last 2 minutes of the first half was not a good outcome. But the two really big ones that, we've talked about in the past where players will take flyers on, safety, overtime, certain, defensive players maybe for MVP, where there is so much value there. It's kind of changed our philosophy and our thought process on putting those up high. But when you think about the Rams on exactly 3 points, which has been rumored to have been anywhere from in the 80 to 100 range to 500 to 1 industry-wide. And, we had exactly 8 to 14 points at 400 to 1. So before a couple of scores in the fourth quarter, which seems like an onslaught, now, I mean, there were some guests that had some big smiles on their faces and a lot of pacing and phone calls on our side when it looked like that it might fall between 8 and 14. So although the props overall were good, there was the potential there for some huge payouts on those props.
Chuck, did anybody have any significant money on any of the defensive players? Because if there was ever a time to give – and don't take it away. My pick – before they announced it, as the game's going on, I said Edelman has to win this. Yeah. Okay. But if there was ever a time to give it to a defensive player, it's in a 13-3 ball game. And Gilmore, to me, played his lights out. I mean, obviously he had the great interception, but he was in there all over the place on every play, it seemed, in the passing game. And really, other than he didn't run one back for a touchdown, they never seemed to give the defensive guy a legitimate shot, but yesterday should have been one of those times.
Yeah, I think had he run it back for a touchdown, or had multiple picks, I think you could have seen that. But usually it's, if it's a defensive player, they're involved in a number of sacks and fumble recoveries and really game-changing plays. I agree with you. I thought Gilmore played a really good game. I thought that interception at the end was, that was more like a punt the way it was thrown into the air. I thought when he first dropped back to pass, and he underthrew, I thought it was because of pressure. But after the replay and watching it again, he clearly had happy feet, threw off his back foot, didn't step into it. You're supposed to throw that ball long. So if it's incomplete, it is long. He underthrew it. Granted, there was an opportunity for Cooks to make a big play earlier, and he's supposed to make that play, and he didn't. But I thought overall, I thought Goff played a really poor game.
He did.
But for me, I really thought Sean McVay called a horrible game.
Well, and you know what? He admitted it basically after the game. I like the accountability on McVay's part, who basically took the blame for the performance. So let's talk a little bit more about the game. And I do want to mention one thing quickly on that interception by Gilmore. There's times when the offensive player has to turn into a defensive player, and Cooks should have done it on that. You got to take the 15-yard offensive pass interference penalty on that. There was no way he was going to get the ball. He was in position to commit interference and make sure the play, the Rams keep possession of the ball. I thought it was a terrible decision on his part, and it made for an easy pick by Gilmore.
It absolutely did. But again, I get back to the play that he should have caught the ball.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you wonder, you think about the Saints and that high-powered offense and how they've been looking for a complementary receiver for Michael Thomas that they dealt him. I really think the one thing that the Patriots have to do in the offseason is, address the wide receiver position. I think Gronk will retire. I think he had a phenomenal career. I think he's a Hall of Famer. He changed that position. He's still capable of some big games. Just don't think he's the same Gronk. And from a health perspective, I think he walks away. And you think about the Patriots, they dealt him. The Rams did acquire him and signed him to a big deal. But I think when you're a wide receiver who's in the top, I think 6 or 7 in salary, you make that catch. You make sure that ball isn't intercepted, and you get more out of that wide receiver. And you have to wonder now, that this is his third team in 3 years. If other teams maybe saw something.
It's clearly on him for the second pass. The first one was solely on Goff. Goff, if he doesn't throw it, he lofted it too much. If he throws that ball on time and leads him, that he doesn't have to turn around like he's a punt receiver, that was a touchdown when it was 3-3. And they take the lead. As bad of the game plan as McVay had, he had them in a position where they could have taken the lead and tied the game. They had those two opportunities, and they went 0 for 2, one on the receiver, one on Goff, and clearly, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really get back to the whole, with the extra week, I really thought Sean McVay, who's, compared to a young Belichick, that he'd have the extra week to prepare, and that I expected when it started going a little bit south and it was apparent that Goff was uncomfortable, their offense just looked out of sync. I mean, you would have thought they would have changed to maybe up-tempo or no huddle, or tried to get Cooks involved with some screens. For whatever reason, I know we talked about the fact, and I've pounded the drum that with Cooper Kupp out, that offense hasn't looked nearly as good. But if Gurley's not healthy and you didn't have Cooper Kupp, that offense over the second half of the season was not nearly as dynamic and potent as it was early in the season.
No, I agree with that completely. But, it's still it almost sounds like when we say that it's taking credit away from the Patriots' defense. And I still don't know how this happened. This was a really bad defense, a below-average defense, especially on the road during the entire regular season. And all of a sudden in the playoffs, I guess this is the brilliance of Belichick and his staff, is that they're able to fix things on the fly better than any other team, maybe in any sport, ever has. Because this was a great defense yesterday, and the personnel hadn't changed at all.
No, but, I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and, what's Belichick great at? And that's taking away something. We saw him take away Hill with the Chiefs, and I think for the most part, he did take away Gurley and he took away Anderson, and that caused exactly what we talked about, Jared Goff to beat you, and he couldn't do it. And I think with that said, Sean McVay had to know coming in, what's Belichick going to try to take away? How do we adjust, and how do we attack when he takes that away? And I thought they were ill-prepared to do that, and you saw that very early on.
There was nothing to slow down the pass rush, and I never seen the Patriots put that much pressure on the quarterback this year with the schemes that they were doing. Obviously, they did have Jared Goff confused. You saw him take a couple plays where he took sacks that he never should have taken the sack, that he should have got rid of the football, saved the yardage, and he was confused. And then the happy feet on the interception. But the other part of the game with them, when you said about going to the hurry up, this was something that I didn't consider in my handicap of the game, and I'll be honest, I was on the Rams, full disclosure, was how much that crowd was in favor of the Patriots. Okay, and they even commented, numerous players after in the interviews, that this was almost like a home game. And if you saw the Rams in the second half, one of the things that they tried to do to offset New England was they were staying in the huddle to after the 15-second mark when they shut the mics off to the helmets, so that not only could Goff not be able to change, but New England wasn't able to change defensive schemes, seeing them come out of the huddle of what they were going to line up. That they did that to try to slow them down, where in past they would have been going hurry-up offense. Instead, they went totally the opposite and went slow down. And again, it led to less plays and less opportunities.
Don't forget, I mean, they had two opportunities. The pass play to Cooks, who was wide open in the end zone, and on that play, he basically threw a punt as well.